Hey, nonprofit leaders, I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host of Inspired Nonprofit Leadership, the show for people running nonprofits who'd rather work smarter than harder with abundance, excellence, and courage. Before we dive in, I want to invite you to join our newsletter where every week you'll get actionable tips, inspiring resources, and updates on new episodes. You can grab it at inspirednonprofitleadership.com. And a big thank you to our sponsor, DonorBox, who has mastered the art and science of removing the friction from donation forms. And you know we love a good process at Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Okay, let's dive in. My guest for this episode is Bill Crouch, the CEO of Bright Dot Fundraising Advisors, who has spent more than 40 years helping nonprofits transform fundraising into meaningful, lasting relationships with donors, the way it should be done, in my opinion. A former college president, fundraising expert, author, and honorary fellow at Oxford University, Bill is the author of Mattership, Making Donors Feel They Matter, where he shares practical strategies for building trust and inspiring generosity. And I hope he'll share some of those today as well. Welcome, Bill. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Before we get started on things fundraising, would you just tell us a little more about yourself personally so we can get to know you?
Thank you, Sarah. It's an honor to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity. My grandmother and my sister both are Sarah, so I
Phenomenal.
always feel appreciated when I'm around you. So I am a typical middle class family child that had wonderful parents. I've always said I never felt like I was the smartest person in the room, but I knew that nobody would ever outwork me. So I rolled up my sleeves for years and worked really, really hard to achieve. I've been a college president for 22 years in a small private liberal arts college in Kentucky, which sat in the shadows of the big University of Kentucky, 12 miles apart. So I was always competing for attention, for students, for money, because I didn't get any money from federal or state government. It was all about private fundraising. And then I also like to have fun. And so my biggest hobby is playing golf. And so some time ago, I said to my wife, I want to play the top 100 golf courses in the world. And we started on that journey together, and I've played 62 of them so far. So
Wow.
it's it's a place where I feel in nature and gets me away from the pressures. Occasionally, I would write a faculty member's name on my golf ball and whack it really hard. So it gave me some stress release as well. But that's a little picture of who I am.
I love that. Well, as a Sarah who's named after her grandmother, Sarah, who died just a few months before I was born, it's an honor to be amongst some other great Sarahs, Grandma Sarahs. And I love that about the golf and setting a goal like that. I'm just back from I'm a sailboat racer, also provides me great therapeutic respite from the
Right.
entire world. And I set a goal. The world championships for my type of boat was within driving distance this summer. And I had set a goal to do it. And it took me
Wow.
on a great adventure to get there. So I just appreciate how much doing something you love, whether it's a sport or not, and kind of setting some sort of goal to give you some structure to go on adventures. Such can be such a
Yeah.
meaningful opportunity.
Yeah, I've discovered that by goal setting, it enables you to somewhat handle distractions
Yeah.
because our lives are filled of distractions. But if you've got this goal and you're set on it, it gives you some balance, I think, with what the world throws at you.
I completely agree. As someone who helps nonprofits set goals for a living, so much we're talking about prioritizing, and we prioritize so that we can actually have fewer distractions, less on our plate, feel less overwhelmed, and get more done. So I
Yes.
love that.
Yes.
I want to talk about fundraising, relationship based fundraising. I think that's a word that when I started out wasn't being used is
Right.
now fairly common. But I think in general, people don't really, maybe haven't really absorbed what that means. And when I hear people's like resistance or fear of individual fundraising, maybe you're calling them major gifts, maybe you're not, but that relationship building, I feel like it's potentially that disconnect between really understanding what do we mean relational versus transactional. So can you go into what that means for you and what you've learned over the years related to those two approaches, if you
But,
will?
one of the things that I know right off the bat that we sabotage ourselves in the nonprofit world away from being able to be patient to develop the kind of relationships that donors really want to have, right? I've often said with my board of trustees at the college, they only cared about one thing really at the end, and that was that we had a black budget at the end of the year, right?
I'm
With
so glad you said that because the first thing when you said like we're not patient, I'm like, that's because you're using an annual budget. And that's for
right,
the IRS, not for you, not for real
correct,
life.
correct, and that forces nonprofits to make short-term decisions that that hurt long-term strategies.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big things that we deal with all the time. I will not take on a client unless I feel that the CEO understands what I now call mattership. And if that's not there in the culture, then we certainly can't deliver that out to the donors as well. And so we're really now focusing on what we call left brain, right brain development operations. And so building a philanthropic engine for a nonprofit requires that there's two different skill levels, two different skills that need to be there. You've got to have what we call left brain, the technical side, the sitting in your office getting things done. Right brain, the creative relational person. But oftentimes the they get mixed up. And particularly if you're in a small nonprofit and you have to do everything,
Yeah.
you're always going to you're always going to default to sitting in the office. Right?
Yeah.
If you got
And
to
that's
put
where we get all those smaller nonprofits asking the question I see on the internet so often, what CRM should I use?
yeah, right,
And I'm like, that's not the right question.
right,
How do you
exactly.
feel? Like, what should they be asking?
Yeah, and that's where we say, Mr. and Mrs. CEO, you're the chief development person, right? We got to set this thing up so that you have 10 or less people that you're really focused on, and they come to appreciate you as a human being who happens to be the CEO of a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Right? So we get even down into you got to have personal stationery that has your home address on the envelope, not your nonprofit's address. You got to show up at places where you're not expected to be showing up because of the relationship. So building relationships is a real intense, intentional discipline, right? And it's not something that you do at the last hour on Friday afternoons.
Yeah.
It's a lifestyle, and I think that we sabotage ourselves so much. When I started in this business, Sarah, the number one problem in fundraising was the turnover of fundraising staff.
Isn't it still the number one
It
problem? Or
still
for
it still
yeah.
is. It still is because
I
there's
just want to like highlight that. I know I'm interrupting you,
yeah,
but like that's 40 years ago, the
yeah,
number one problem. And it's still the
and
number one problem. So
and there's
tell us
and
about
there's
it. What
yeah, and
what's
we think there's four reasons.
okay.
The first is we hire the wrong people. Nobody grew up wanting to be a fundraiser, so everybody falls into the profession, but we don't ask the right questions when we're interviewing, right? And so we're hiring the wrong person. It takes about 16 months for that person to realize I don't like this job because now it's time to start asking for money. It takes a supervisor about 16 months to accept the fact I hired the wrong person. The third, which I always thought was the biggest one, the only way you can get a raise is to go to another nonprofit because we typically just give this lifestyle, the life adjustment. But now I'm seeing it differently. And what I'm seeing is one of the things that drives us is the culture. There's not a mattership culture where a fundraiser, particularly that person who's entering the CRM and stuff, doesn't really feel like their lives they matter. So we think now that every person on a development shop should have the same title,
Oh, and what is the title?
director of major gifts,
I love it. So I
because
love that because I often am coaching clients on hiring and often helping them build out their first development department just from the point of like, hey, you're missing this function. And when people get really hung up on titles, I'm like, people should have whatever title helps them do their job the most.
correct.
And I love director of development because that sounds like someone you'd want to talk to. But tell me
Yeah.
more how you came up to it.
So the director of major gifts. So
Or director of
I
major
was
gift. Yes.
yeah, so I was doing a project with a major university, and we were training all 147 of their development people in in our strategies. And I went around and interviewed all of them. And one of the people, well, when I was over at the account services area, and I was interviewing a researcher, I walked into her office and there was a folder that looked like a diploma folder. And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Well, I've included the institution in my will, and they gave me this here, and I'm so proud of it." And I said, "Hey, I've got a question for you. When was the last time a major gift officer walked into your office to say thank you because they had gotten $1 million gift, but you're the one who had identified the individual, did the research, and passed it on?"
Yeah.
She said, "I've been here 16 years." And she started crying. She said, "Nobody's ever walked in this office to say thank you." Right. Now, the reason she was staying there, I asked her, "Why are you here?" "Well, I have children on tuition waiver." It was not that she felt that she mattered, and that's where the titles come up, you know, and I think isn't the goal of every development office to get major gifts? So even the person that's putting in that, the annual fund, right, is to begin to identify some people that we might be able to go to, right? Events that we do is to identify people, and especially in our world now that's not an 80-20 world anymore, it's a 95-5 world where 95% of the wealth is held by 5% of the people. And
And
that
just pause there for a second because I think folks who've been listening have heard at some point occasionally 80-20 comes up, but like the 80-20 of 80-20 is what you just said. That was it five
it's
by
gone. 80-20 is gone. All right.
80. Yeah.
And the middle class, the incentives to give, having the money to give now when you're worried about gas and food and all of those things is just changing. And so there has to be a focus on who are these folks who have the wealth. And and one thing we know, we can never say, "Hey, we want that person to have more money." People have their capacity. But what we can do is influence what they do with their philanthropy.
Yeah.
And we've created a whole list of strategies to enable folks to begin to first of all, you got to find who these people are. Then you got to be able to know who they are. Then you got to be able to get an appointment. It's all that, which we call the surprise strategy.
Why do you call it the surprise strategy?
Because we've done a lot of brain science research on high wealth individuals. We have on our team a performance psychologist who has been training the special forces at a military base on how to control their emotions when they're jumping out of an airplane, knowing they're going to be shot at when they hit the ground. And I said, well, that sort of feels like a major gift person getting ready to go ask for their first $1 million gift. Yeah. How do they do that? So we wanted to understand. And so we through all the research have done about the brain, we know that for high wealth people, there are emotional people that getting to their hearts is important. And there are 5 or 6 things that we can do to engage with them. For instance, their most valuable thing is their time.
Yeah.
They don't read paragraphs. They want bullet points. They don't do band-aids. They want to create solutions. They want to know you know them
Yeah.
and who they are. One high wealth person told me recently, said, Bill, every high wealth person loves art and music. He said, no development person should ever come see me unless they know what art and what music I like. All right.
That's
Because
powerful.
that shows respect.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm hearing they want to be known. They want to create real change. Money isn't the obstacle, but time can be.
Yep.
And as I'm hearing those, I think of all, like, maybe the mistakes, right, that our listeners are making, and I feel like that, like, sums it up so clearly, right? You're you're rushing, right, when you should be putting in the time so that your donors don't have to.
Yes.
You are probably asking too little. And I've seen this, I see this in the nonprofit space and I see it in the for-profit entrepreneur space when business owners decide they want to go after a higher net worth clientele. Often the biggest lever they have to pull is change their pricing so that it like speaks that high net worth individual language. Like $1,000 is not their language, right? And you have to know what level money language they're speaking at. Like
Right.
if they think of things in $100,000 increments, then you need to talk to them in $100,000 increments. I had a friend who has a very high net where I was coaching her on this, and I was like, "Well, you know some high net worth individuals, like, what do they spend, like, just on a day of shopping? Like, nothing too crazy, but just like, oh, I decided to go on a nice shopping day today." And she's like 250,000. I'm like, well, now you have a base, right? For that person, 250,000 is what they'd spend on a, like, just a fun shopping day.
Yeah.
Like, what would they spend to change the world, like, to make
Yeah.
it a better place?
And I've discovered I've spent a lot of time going around interviewing top performers. And I only ask them one question when I get the opportunity to sit in front of them. And the question's always different depending on who I was going to see. So I was interviewing the retired CEO of the United States Chamber of Commerce. And my question was, what is one thing you learned running the Chamber of Commerce across the United States that you could teach me that I could teach nonprofit clients how to do their business better?
Yeah.
And he's without hesitation, he said, Bill, eagles never do their work where sparrows nest. And he said, most nonprofits boards are made up of sparrows. He said, now that's God's favorite bird. A sparrow is very important. We nonprofits could not operate without sparrows. So he said a sparrow is somebody who will come to a monthly meeting or a quarterly meeting, who will sit there for 2 hours and listen to the staff make reports, who will get into an argument about whether to spend $200 or $300 to buy a new computer for somebody, who will write a check for $1,000 and buy a seat at a gala. And that's who makes up most nonprofit boards. So every nonprofit board wants an eagle. So an eagle is a person who could write a check for $1 million or more, but they hate meetings. They could care less about a $200 computer. They're not going to listen to staff give reports, right? And they hang out with each other. So if you get lucky and find one of those people and put them on your board, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to become a sparrow or they're going to quit.
I
That's why with our clients, we create a separate board called the Eagle Board.
I love that. I give the same advice, but for different reasons. Well, I mean, that's always part of it. I'm like, your high net worth individuals, they don't wanna also be on your board, right?
Right.
Money
Right.
is their leverage thing that they can do something, and they have connections that they might wanna share. And I also like, I don't think we should be consolidating money and power and decision making. So, in general, my advice to nonprofit boards is have that group of nerdy folks who have some time to give, who want to provide true oversight. They want to do the boring work, but important work of just double checking to make sure nothing's going off the rails. And
Right.
that's it. not power hungry people who want to make decisions about strategy because they're not in the weeds and they have no skin in the game. So they're terrible at that. Not people who are really there to give, like, let's give them their own thing. And I love the Eagles. I love that. Say again, we call it the Eagles board.
Eagles board.
The
It's
Eagle.
we say 5 or 6 people.
Yep.
They're all Eagles. They never come to your facility to have meetings. They meet in each other's homes or at their offices because they like to compete and compare, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they only meet twice a year and they only have one agenda item. Who of our friends can we ask to give to this cause?
Yeah.
Right?
I love it. I
And
love
sparrows sometimes will get jealous. Well, I want to be a part of that. Well, that's great. So we say there's got to be a minimum gift requirement to be an eagle. So I did this at my college and we started this and it required $1 million gift.
Yeah.
It took me 18 months to get the first person to do it. 6 weeks later, I had 5 more
Yeah.
because that person called their buddies.
Because they bring they bring their friends. Like,
Right?
any times I've heard people talk about working with a high net worth community, they describe it as there's like a moat, around the community that is very hard to penetrate because those folks have learned that they need to safeguard their wealth. They are targets, so they put up this big barrier. But once you're in, you are just like in the eagle's nest,
Right.
to use your metaphor, right? And
Right.
and then it's so easy because they're referring each other even more than other folks do because they know that the number of people who, are safe
Right.
in the walls, in the nest is limited and they value recommendations so much.
Absolutely. And so what we're trying to do is to break the fundraising pattern. Right. We say, don't do golf tournaments. You're just inviting your vendors and others who want a day off to come and they're going to give you $100 or $200. Right. And with
Yeah.
all the staff time, if you're going to do a gala, make sure that there's 10 or 12 people sitting in that gala and you have very clear strategies about what's going to happen the next 2 weeks. Because the most important thing about a gala is the 2 weeks afterwards when
Yeah.
most staff go back and relax and
And they're tired.
thank God it's over with, right? But that's the most important place of where it is. And we believe that high wealth people have so many different interests and things that they're involved in. They can buy anything except an experience that you can give them that they can't get any other way.
Yeah.
And so we think it's what spending the time as a team. How can we surprise Mr. Eagle? What's one thing that we could do that they've never seen done before? And so we build those types of surprise knowledge for our clients so that they can get this type of attention of the donors.
Yeah.
Money's not the issue. I get so tired of people saying, you know, we don't have prospects and all that stuff. That's just not the case. There's $352 billion as of Friday in donor advised funds across this country. 90% of it is unrestricted,
Yeah.
and 20% of the donors have forgotten they even set it up. So that money's just sitting there
Love that.
waiting
Yeah.
for us to find it.
Now, what about those folks? I know they're wrong, but I hear them all the time. I just don't know anybody who's a high net worth individual.
Right.
How on earth am I supposed to find that first one that
Right.
took you 18 months to find?
So 90 to 95% of all nonprofit employees grew up in lower to middle class families. So a high wealth is out of their comfort zone. Totally. So you've got to find some folks who's that's in their world. And where we say it's at the wealth managers, bankers, and real estate agents.
Mhm.
I was just in a meeting yesterday with one of our clients where we had exactly those people, real estate wealth managers there sharing the impact that this organization was making on the lives of people. And we discovered that we've got to treat those people, those wealth managers, as if they are $1 million donors. We have to get them excited before they'll ever turn to any of their clients to bring them on board. But that's where we found to be the opening for
That's so
nonprofits.
key, and I'd love to go into that a little more because I hear people make this connection like, "Oh, wealth advisors, lawyers, accountants, they know." But then they jump right to, "We gotta get them to give us their clients," and, like,
Uh,
they're not gonna do that because they're there to safeguard. They're literally the wall. So
right.
tell us about, but then you said the magic thing, right? They have to feel like they're the donor, and then the wall's gone. So can you tell us a little more about
Yeah.
how you've done that?
So just yesterday when we had these folks here, I said, let us share, and the CEO of the nonprofit was there and he was involved in this. But I said, let us share our strategy of how we're going to get to high wealth people. Right. And why we want to get to them. Because we want to say to them, your life matters as a high wealth person. And we want to show you how your life matters as a high wealth person. And so I share with these wealth managers how we go about doing it. And then I said to the wealth managers, but that doesn't matter to us right now. What matters is you, the people sitting around this table. Your life matters because you're the key to opening the door to the people who can give the resources to make that happen. And I ask them, how many of you know about donor advised funds? Well, I'll raise a hand. How many of you have donor advised funds in your bank? All raise your hand. I said, I know you're not going to tell me who they are, but by the time we get our building our relationship with you, you're going to start bringing them to us. And that's what happens. Okay?
Yeah.
So, but again, we're back to my favorite word, patience.
Patience. Yeah.
So when they left, we met with the development team and we came up with surprise ways to go to those wealth managers. So I always have a favorite question I always ask.
Okay. I
I
love a
always
good
ask a client,
question.
I'll ask you, Sarah, what was your favorite childhood toy?
My favorite childhood toy, I had this plastic giraffe you could ride on. It was meant for indoors, but I took it like all over outdoors where I grew up in the country.
And why was that important? I mean, why did you do that? What was it about that giraffe?
Sparked my imagination about adventures that I could be on and a friend that was with me, you know. Later I had real horses, and
Well,
those were cool too.
so let me tell you why that's important. Because now let's say I've had this conversation with you, and I'm coming back to you 6 weeks down the road, and I say, hey, Sarah, I would like to come see you. I got to tell you something. You know, these kids that we've been taking care of at our place. They've been locked up in terms of losing their imagination and creativity for the future. And they don't have friends or people who can spark that imagination in their lives to help them become something special. And we want to have you join us and belong to our community to help us do that in the lives of people. So what I'm doing, I'm giving you back your vocabulary.
Yes.
All right. The other thing I'm doing yesterday, one of the gentlemen, I always ask that question and people laugh at me. And I said, well, let me tell you what, the key to getting a high wealth donor is to get to their joy place. And
Yeah.
the place to get to their joy place is ask them what their favorite childhood toy was. Right.
Such a good question.
So yesterday, when I asked that, one of the gentlemen said, a fire truck. And I said, ask him. And he said, the ladder and all that kind of stuff. So immediately when he left, we went on eBay. We bought a toy fire truck, which we're going to package with the card and send to him and thank him for coming to the meeting.
Yeah.
Right. That's, that's what
That
we do.
says you listened,
We
you paid
listen.
attention,
You
and you
matter.
did something meaningful.
Yes. And I think the listening skill is something that has not been taught well in our profession. And, and, and by asking the right questions and just listening, but coming up with a stupid question like, what's your favorite childhood toy? Our team spent 2 years trying to figure out what kind of questions can we ask that people will reveal who they are.
Yeah.
Like you asked me at the beginning, Bill, tell us something about you that we don't know. That is a great major gift fundraising lead in.
I love that example, the live example you just gave, and I hope people will go back and re-listen to that clip and then think about I mean, I always say, like, answers are the easy part if you have the right question, right? And I think that this is such an unlock for people. You asked me a question, an easy question to answer, and you immediately got me to dish up, like, that probably some of the top things I value, like outdoors, adventure, friendship, like, it's like if anybody wanted to know Sarah, right? Like you just dished it up and like you said, like you give somebody the answer back to them. Whenever
Right.
people ask me like, "Oh, how are we going to come up with marketing messaging?" I'm like, "Well, we're going to talk to people and then we're going to use their word as the marketing messaging, right? We're going to listen."
And Sarah, that's
And the
something else that we've learned too, that our clients are using the wrong vocabularies. Most collateral that nonprofits come with uses the collateral of the people they're trying to serve. The high wealth people have a totally different vocabulary. And so what we do is every time I go to a Delta Sky Club, which is a lot, there's a magazine rack. And the
Yep,
magazine rack is for the first class people who are buying first class tickets. They're always high wealth magazines. I
yep,
always take every one of them, put it in my backpack, take it to my team, and we tear out the advertising. And we look at the verbs and the adjectives that they're using in their advertising, the high wealth people. Then we get our clients to develop a high wealth collateral piece using that vocabulary. And it's powerful, right?
yeah. Yeah, I love it. Such a good example. Even just being in the Delta Club, I know a consultant who works with high wealth individuals, and she uses buying a first class plane ticket as a marketing strategy,
Absolutely.
right? So, like we say, go where the people are, right? Like that person isn't looking to buy things on Facebook. They are sitting in first class on an airplane, right? And it's like guaranteed you're going to get a couple hours of one on one time
Right.
and I don't know of any nonprofits who are using this strategy, but I feel like it would totally make sense. Of course, it would go in the face of all the cultural nonsense about, yeah, why are people flying first class? But maybe you should be flying first class. Those directors of major gifts should be flying first class all over the country.
Yeah, we enjoyed creating high wealth strategies for nonprofits, even their lapel pins that they wear. It usually says the name of their institution. We say, no, no. It needs to be something that person will ask you, what is that? So
Yeah.
like our bright dot logo is very unusual. And I get asked all the time on airplanes and other places, hey, what is that? Because it doesn't say the name of my company. It's just
Yeah.
a that they ask me that then gives me the opportunity to tell them about my company. And that's the type of creative thinking it takes
Yeah.
to to change this fundraising pattern that nonprofits have been in for a long, long time.
I love that. We've gone a long time, but you have so much good stuff to offer. I want to run a scenario by you and get your thoughts on it. So I had a client who recently asked me if I had like a template annual fundraising strategy. And I was like, I don't. And then I was like, wait, why don't I? Like, I'm like a strategy person. I'm like, oh, because relationships aren't built. You don't design an annual relationship strategy. It's based on each relationship and where it's at and its own timeline. So could you tell me what you hear in that like those folks are like, I need the annual strategy of campaigns and how that is or isn't part of the kind of fundraising you're talking about?
Well, let me go at it this way. We don't think any major gift officer should have more than 35 people in their portfolio, right? And they should be in ABC classifications.
Okay.
We know all about that. All right. We think annual funds are based upon getting that operating budget in the black every year, right? And we think there's other ways to do that. So we've created what we call the 90-10 strategy. We know that people will give more money for a restricted ask than they will for an unrestricted ask. So we did a policy where we get the boards to approve it. that says that every restricted gift you get, 10% of it goes directly to the annual fund. And the donor can opt out, but they never do because they understand you got to cut on the light to do things. And that creates a flow of revenue. We also think, hey, get your monthly giving program down really good, right? But direct mail, it's just different. Yeah, how we do that. So we think there's no such thing as a template that would work for an annual fund plan that everybody can use because every organization is different.
Yeah.
And it's that pressure that's put on them to this operating budget piece. And in most cases, they're not involved in the creation of the budget.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
They're told this is what you got to bring in this year. And it just blows everything up. So we think that that you got to be engaged at the very beginning, but you got to move. It takes a lot of $100 gifts to equal a million.
Yeah. Not so many $100,000 gifts, though, right?
And right, and it
And very few $1,000,000 gifts to reach a million.
and so we think what my whole concept about mattership is that you start thinking about every single person matters. First of all, everybody that works in the operation matters. And a CEO should be walking into the development office regularly, patting people on the back, asking how their children are, those type things. When I started, I went to be on the faculty of a university. The president, after 6 months, invited me to his office, which scared the heck out of me. And he said, "Hey, I think you can be a college president one day. You got to learn how to raise money. And what I'm going to do is put you in the development office if you'll go, but I want you to be my chauffeur for 2 years. And everywhere I go," and he was a former vice president of development at a major university. "Everywhere I go, I want you to go. I want you to go in and see, because I want to model." And I think that's another thing we don't do well. We don't mentor within the organization,
Yeah.
right?
So important.
Yeah, and I think it's really, 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 really critical
Yeah.
to do
Because
that.
there's so many like micro moves, if you will, in great relationship building that someone is never going to like maybe write them all down in a manual. And even if they did, it'd be really hard to learn, but we can learn them by observing and start to realize all those habits and behaviors that people who are great at relationship building pick up.
Right. So we our bright dot principle is surprise them, connect them, and let them know they matter.
Yeah.
That's what you do with all donors, and with the high wealth donors, it has to be done person to person.
Yeah. I love it.
There are ways you can do it transactionally, but it has to be deliberate and intentional.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are at time, but before we wrap up, for those people listening, being like, oh my God, I want more of what Bill is saying, who should be reaching out to you? Who should be buying the book? And what's the best way to stay connected?
Thank you, Sarah. Well, what we pride ourselves on is helping build the philanthropic engines of organizations, and it takes us our contracts are usually for about 18 months. It starts off with some coaching and other things, and leads to building this engine. We have clients who have 140 development people, and we have clients who have one. It's a matter of whether they're coachable and whether they want to learn. We oftentimes we're asked, how much does it cost to get you or do other things? And we said, it's not, it doesn't cost anything. It's not an expense. It's an investment, right? And we want people who believe in the investment, who are willing to do that. So I'm at bill at thebrightdot.com. Our website is the Bright Dot. And we have an inquiry page there that they can go to and get a free 30-minute strategy session with me, just to talk, to see if there's something that could work. We're national, so we have clients all over the country, and we want to make an impact. Our purpose as a company, when we started 12 years ago, was to impact 100 million lives. And we'll never know whether we have or not, but we know
Yeah.
there's ripple effect. Every single person we help will help others who will help others who will help others. And so that's what we do. The book Mattership's just come out. It's called a rapid impact book. Those books have to be less than 100 pages and have to be read in an hour and a half. So it's easy to read, but it's full of wisdom and ideas that can help people help their donors feel like they matter.
Amazing. Well, folks should check it out. We'll have all those links in the show notes. Thank you so much, Bill, for sharing with us generously and all the years that you put into growing what you have created today and helping those out there. And thank you out there for tuning in and everything you do to make our communities better. If you could help me for a moment, take a small moment to like and review this podcast. It helps it in the rankings and the algorithms and helps more people like you get this kind of valuable information. Until next time, take care of yourself, and I wish you all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.